So you started off, mainly writing fantasy with Shadows of the App series. After those novels that you'd rather, keep hidden away in your mind and your your notes and everything. But eventually you started writing more science fiction as well, and I'm curious what that transition was like, going from fantastical worlds to more science fictional worlds.
I mean, so yes, Children of Time was my first sci-fi, and it was very much a bit of a punt. Basically, because I grew up reading science fiction, I wanted to write that kind of science fiction. I also I came across this Fiona Cross's research into the portia spider behavior, which basically just fired my imagination of, well, what if there was a world where that was the dominant sentient species? How would it go? Which was the thought experiment that kind of led to the book. But I mean, at the time, I was kind of known as a modest selling fantasy author, known to my publisher at least as that. Um, and we had quite a series of negotiations, and we just about convinced them that I let him do this book about spiders from outer space and get it out of his system. Pretty
Hmm.
much, I think, was the general attitude. And I mean, certainly when it was so to write it was interesting because for fantasy books, I don't generally research because I'm almost always working in entirely a secondary world, but I had to actually work out an awful lot of stuff, space travel stuff, and especially the kind of evolutionary biology stuff. So that was a bit of a shock to the system, but it was an interesting experience that I've kind of built on with later books. And then the book came out to no great fanfare and kind of for about a year did very little and garnered very, very, no real interest and got some fairly middling reviews. And then the Clark's shortlisting came and everything kind of exploded.
Hmm. That's interesting that it was a bit like middling at the beginning, because now, having read Children of Time, and I've shown it to a few friends, and who I think are like more science fiction oriented, and they absolutely love it as well. And after the award and everything like that, it's kind of surprising to hear that it was a bit of a slow burn at first.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect it's probably not an unusual story. I mean, I everything seemed like an overnight success after you're successful
Yeah, that's true.
because people only really take notice of it when you're being successful.
Hmm.
But I was obviously doing well enough that they were still wanting me to write fantasy for them. In fact, when Children of Time came out, it was kind of in the middle of the Echoes of the Fall series. So it was, I mean, that's how much it was just intended to be a bit of a kind of a side project alongside the regular writing.
Yeah, and I mean, we spoke about this a bit in January when you were on the space opera panel, but your science fiction has sort of surpassed your fantasy in terms of what readers are wanting more of, and in turn what you end up writing a bit more of as well. So for
Yeah,
you,
by
like,
by several orders of magnitude. I mean,
yeah.
I've not had a proper fantasy novel out for years now. In fact, towards
Hmm.
the end of this year, there's a book coming out called City of Last Chances, which is going to be my first proper sort of fantasy release
Yeah, and I mean, how does that
since Redemption's Blade.
yeah, I mean, how does that feel, just to sort of bring fantasy back into your fold a little bit from a creative perspective, but also how has it been returning to it from like a project writing craft perspective compared to creating a science fiction story?
It's well, writing fantasy is enormous fun because you have that kind of ultimate freedom to build the world way you want it. And so being able to go back to a world which can just have whatever, well, all manner of weird stuff in it. And I mean, this has been a book I've been kicking about on the back burner for years, trying to find an actual opportunity to write it. But in general, people have been wanting the science fiction from me. So it's I almost feel it's again I've kind of reversed the situation from Children of Time as basically I've convinced someone to let me do a fantasy book just as a bit of a treat.